turns green, we can hear you. Push it.
Are you set? Good evening. Good evening. So I'll start out with a friendly reminder requested by our controller. If you want to sign up for the public hearing, the sheets are over there on that table. And then if you can hand them to Mr. Minarski, who's either standing there or walking between the table or he's sitting up there. So it would be helpful if you sign up in advance and we don't have to wait until the public hearing. So good evening. Welcome to the Board of Estimate and Taxation Budget Committee's fiscal year 2023-2024 budget presentations and public hearing. We are the 4 members of the Budget Committee. I am Leslie Tarkington, the chair. On my left are Leslie Moriarty and Nisha Arora, and on my right is Laura Erickson. Thank you for your interest in our town and the fiscal 2024 budget, and for attending this evening's meeting in person or by watching the presentations and public hearing on Greenwich Community Television on channels 24, 79, or YouTube. Thank you to the GCTV team, Hurst Tebby and Don Conway, who produced this meeting. Tonight's meeting will be continuous. The meeting will begin with the town budget fiscal year 24 budget presentation, followed by the Board of Education schools presentation. This will be followed by the public hearing. All comments received by completing the form linked to the agenda will be posted on the Budget Committee webpage. For the public hearing, we will call on speakers in the order in which they signed to speak. Laura will call names of the speaker and the next to speak. Please get ready. Each speaker will be asked to introduce themselves and their organization or location of their residence. The speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes. Town Controller Pete Minarski will time. We ask you to accommodate the number of fellow speakers. If a topic has been raised, please do not repeat it or only bring up new topics or issues. The department meeting process begins next Tuesday, January 31. Meeting dates are provided in the BET calendar section of the town website, as well as the budget schedule section with suggested department meeting dates. The fiscal year 24 budget meeting days and time schedules are subject to change due to changes to department availability. All times are approximate and subject to change due to length of department reviews. The Budget Committee welcomes Fred Camillo, First Selectman, and Ben Branyan, Town Administrator, to present the town's fiscal year 24 operating and capital budget. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody, members of the Budget Committee, public officials, and guests. Welcome to Greenwich Town Hall for the 2023-2024 First Selectman's budget presentation. And before we get started, I'd like to thank Ben Branyan, our Town Administrator and Chief Operating Officer, for again quarterbacking this effort. It just didn't start last week. He's been working on it for months and months and months, and it wouldn't get done without Ben and certainly all of the department heads and the people in those departments that assisted them, BET officials, RTM members, and our labor negotiator, Mike Mason. Thank you. It is truly a team effort. And a team effort in very challenging times. So thank you. Okay, so we will get started. Here is an outline of the presentation, 5 parts: the BET guidelines, capital budget, operating budget, headcount, and summary. BET guidelines. Continue current programming and services. Capital projects at $100 million for fiscal year '24, the most in our history. Capital projects at $400 million for fiscal years '24 through '28. A mill rate increase of 2.99%. Estimated budget increases without benefits, 2.9% for the BOE, Board of Education, and 2% for the town. Going on to the capital budget. Governed by Article 2, Section 21B of the Town Charter, the first selectman shall develop goals and objectives and establish priorities for spending for the ensuing fiscal year. Establish priorities with respect to recommended capital spending for all town agencies, and develop a long-range capital spending plan. If you were here last year, you remember the comments. We said the current CIP development process was broken. It placed unreasonable expectations on the public, the departments, and elected officials. There were 2 parts, scale and scope. But for good planning, multi-year budget expectations are needed. And a 15-year budget is overstated. With clarity of scope, projects will now be reduced the total 15-year budget, as well as the projected debt service. We've revitalized the CIP process. Last year, we had a goal of creating a level of certainty with capital over the next 5 years. BET guidelines stated the first selectman shall provide a consolidated 5-year capital plan that includes $400 million of projects inclusive of fiscal year '24. It is recognized that future capital goals may vary with changed economic environments, revised capital goals, and administrations. The 5-year capital estimate recognizes funding limitations and aligns the community's expectations and budget realities. For the next 5 years, you're going to see, you've heard that was a $400 million guideline. And you're going to see it says $403.2 million, looking like we went over it by $3.2 million. But that doesn't include the senior center interior upgrades that are going to be fully funded by a grant from Mary Louise Wallace, her estate. So that really is $400 million, so we hit that. And we want to thank the late Mary Louise Wallace for her generosity to her hometown. And up there you can see over the next 5 years, the orange is Board of Ed, blue is the town. And you can see there again, the first year, we're at 124, and it goes to the fiscal year '24, which is 403, or really 400. Okay, thank you. The '24 capital budget. Town's capital plans include annual investments in town infrastructure. Annual pavings, $3.75, highway maintenance, $2 million, and stormwater drainage is $750,000. Continue funding of the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, $1.89 million, which you know has now been torn down. We have started to redo that with a $5 million grant from the Cohen Foundation, and a new budget process, a new fundraising process will soon be underway to get that number down even more. And we have the soil remediation project at Greenwich High School for $3.5 million. One of my favorites, Roger Sherman Baldwin Park. You'll see in fiscal year '24, it's $400,000 for 30% design. Fiscal year '25 to '27, $10.6 million, relocation of the Parks and Rec operations, key there, and improvements to the park. The project is connected to the Holly Hill Resource Recovery Facility. For those of you who were born here, it's the dump. And the big thing here is, you can see that beautiful rendering. That is on the waterfront. We are housing trucks there now. We're changing oil there, which is possibly the most expensive real estate, maybe on the East Coast. It's been that way since the 1950s. The goal is to restore sight lines there of the harbor that haven't been seen since the 1950s. The one holdup is trying to find a place to put the Parks and Rec operation, because that $10.6 million you're looking at, we've already had 2 foundations reach out to us. Well, we reached out to one reached out to us, wanting to help get that number down. probably a naming opportunity or a couple there for that. But there's also a third in the mix. So you can see that 10.6 million should come down considerably, but it won't happen until we find a place. So we have located the one place that works. It's Holly Hill. So you can see there, that's been talked about since I was a little kid, which is just a couple of years ago. And it's got to be done at some point. And if you add the two together, it looks like, why? Why are we spending $24 million just to do this and rearrange the dump facility? Well, it's needed down there, number one. And number two, this here would be a huge town asset. But again, that first number will come down considerably once we can get this over to the Holly Hill. So it really is critical that that gets funded. Thank you. Dorothy Hamill Rink Facility. Fiscal year '24, $950,000 design and construction plans. Fiscal year '25, $21 million construction costs. Parks and Rec issued an RFP. We've been talking about this for the last year and a half for ice skating rink operations and management. The committee is reviewing proposals that may impact the capital request. The goal here is short-term and long-term. We wanted to change the operations down there and modernize it. And we think with a brand-new rink, it's going to need a different way of operating it. Now, in that RFP, if one of the proposals, if they take an entity takes it over there and increases hours there, which they can absolutely do, they have plans to renovate it themselves. But it wouldn't be a brand new one, but it'd be a renovation. So that number would come down considerably, if not all. However, if the town chooses to build a brand new one, that will still come down because I see several hockey families in here who have already reached out to us, very willing and able to help us with a public-private partnership there. And also, we are looking at, actively looking at other sites for a second permanent rink, not on the water that was out there, but other that could happen that would really help with alleviate the stress on our hockey, on our surfaces, because we really, the hockey time is very valuable and there's a huge demand, and we don't want our teams having to go out of town all the time. So this is critical, and it's not just hockey players, it's all skaters, but we're looking at a two-pronged approach there, and we think that can work. Thank you. Fleet performed a complete reprioritization, and they focused on fire apparatus to maintain operational readiness. If you look there, lead time prior to fiscal year '21 was only 9 months. Today, it's 24 months. If you're looking at that, you're seeing the same two problems affecting fleet that you're seeing all over the place, not only in our budget, but every budget in the country, which is inflation and pipeline problems. So that we want to make sure that our fire department is ready to go, and it's critical that we get the apparatus that they need and again, we can't waste time with it because you look at the lead time there. That's critical. BOE capital adjustments. Rearranged projects. The Board of Ed's 5-year request is $266 million, almost $267 million, and the first selectman's request is $222 million. But I want to point out, it's just a rearrangement there. We support all of the projects. We've pushed them out a year. You only do one project at a time. Right now it's Central. Old Greenwich would be next, but these are all worthwhile projects that have to be done. But we just rearranged them, so those numbers there, nothing was cut. Central Middle School. The current estimated project cost for Central Middle School will be an important discussion topic between the BOE and the BET throughout the budget process with the goal of appropriating funds for a brand new Central Middle School. Fiscal year 23 is $2.5 million. The BOE submitted $85.5 million. The BET guidelines were $67.5 million. We are putting in $75.2 million. And it's not just splitting the difference. Having studied what's happened in the past there, we know the short-term enrollments are slated to go down, but that's in the near term. I remember when Coscop School was going to be closed in the 1980s, and there was similar trends. and people were saying to close it, close it, close it. Well, when they finally rebuilt it, it came back with a vengeance, and it's the people, kids were coming there, and it's full. So you always have to be careful of that. So you want to give a little bit of a cushion, but I thought the 85 to 90 million was a little bit high. So we want to give a little bit of a cushion, but we also want to make sure that we keep our eye on the ball there and get a brand-new, state-of-the-art school there, but exactly what's needed, and maybe just a little bit more of a cushion, but we think that will work there at 75.2. OG. So I had the opportunity and the pleasure to go there the other day, and I want to thank the principal and the staff and the building committee there. They're doing a great job. That building was built in 1902. So typically with buildings like that, they present a challenge because you really want to keep a beautiful facade like that, and the structure is great. People love it. But what happens is it's been a couple of renovations, so when you're going, some parts of it, there's high ceilings, other parts are low ceilings, and sometimes they're dipping down stairs and going back up. So the challenge there is to keep that beautiful school, but to bring it up to code. And I think they got a handle on it, and it's a great project. It's the first thing that's going to be done on that is if you're looking at that straight on there, what hits you right away? There's no ADA compliance or inclusion there, so that's got to be done right away. So excited about that one, and we'll get that done. But that was just pushed out to fiscal year '25 because, again, we can only do one at a time. JC, everything that was asked for there is going to be funded. So thank you. So Western Middle School soil remediation. So many of you were at the middle school on January 11th. The representatives from the EPA, from the federal government was there, and from the state, DEEP. What's great is now we're actually getting close to this now. So I added $10 million for fiscal year '24 to get this done. These kids have been without a playing field for 6 years. That means whole classes went through their 3 years there, having to be bussed around the town, never being able to play on their home field. And as somebody who spent a lot of time on those fields there, if you look at them, they clearly not only can fill a void for the school, but with not the baseball field, but the multi-purpose field, it would make a beautiful sports complex. Really, and you could actually even put some lights there. You're not really bothering anybody. The bakery's there, the school's there, the dump's there. But that would really alleviate a lot of the stress and the need and the demand for all fields. The baseball field way in the back is the most contaminated part of it, but that would also be remediated. So that is critical that we get those kids back out on the field, and also help the rest of the town by adding more playing surfaces. Another one of my favorites, the Havemeyer Building. You can see there, purpose of this committee that I put together is to identify and evaluate and possibly recommend potential options for the future use of this building, and also make sure that we find a place for the Board of Ed that they are comfortable in and that works for the Board of Ed. So the first thing that Lauren Rabin and I did in December of 2019 was go to see Dr. Jones and told her, and we were very willing participant, but again, made sure that we knew that they need to be housed in a place that works for them. So we're certainly aware of that. And again, it's that thing where you have a goal, but something else has to happen first. So that's what has to happen first there. But this committee was formed to, again, identify, evaluate, and possibly recommend, and to see what the opportunity cost is that we're missing out here now, to having a government entity on a space that is evaluated at probably $100 million between land and building. And the building, it needs a lot of work. And it's our building. We have to fix it up. About 20 years ago, there was a pledge for $30 million, and the town turned it down. So we're back at square one. And if we don't get it, then we're going to have to pay for that. And it was 20 years ago. There was a group that was put together by Peter Malkin, B. Crumbine, Chuck Royce was involved with that. So we have to remember when we make decisions about turning things down that sometimes it comes back to bite us. You also know that I removed $4.6 million BOE capital request for a building that, if we're going to be looking at another use for it and to renovate it, I think that's a waste of money putting that into there right now, because we really do the building. If you look at an article from 20 years ago, then Superintendent Larry Leverett said in the paper, the building's in shambles. That was 20 years ago. So I think it's time. And this just shows a capital pressure on our budget. We are committed, and I am committed to getting these projects done, but we want to make sure that, people know that you'll see it in your taxes and budgets, and the BET really works hard at keeping this down, and they deserve a lot of credit. We'll get it done, and we'll get it done in a way that protects and keeps our town affordable for its residents. On to the operating budget. You'll see there the expenses, the change in expenses across the town services, education, and we're going on to budget summary. So if you look at here, most of them are at or below what the guidelines were, except for fire, police, public works, and fleet. Fleet is the second smallest item on the line item, so it doesn't really affect it that much, but that 17% really is due to fuel and parts. There's a 97% increase there, and that's all over the place. So they've really been hit hard. Fire, it's $516,000 in salary and $201,000 in overtime. So that was a 98% increase. Public Works, 67% increase in 3 categories. Utilities are 29%, 30% for waste disposal fees, and another 9% for maintenance and supplies. And then the police. Okay, we've had enhanced police coverage of our school system, right? All of our buildings after Uvalde, Texas. From May to June of 2022, a police officer at each and every school. The GPD received interim appropriations of $682,000 from September through October. 5 officers, roving patrols, 3 schools per officer. And you can see the coverage, OT bases, rapidly responding to schools, and maintains the current BOE security patrols at $697,000, fiscal year '24. Summary, so we reviewed options to mitigate this expense. One was to eliminate school patrols, was not going to happen. Reduction of other police services to offset expense, or adjustments to school patrols. In fiscal year '24, the budget includes $418,000 for BOE security patrols, and what we've done is we've adjusted the school patrols. So with 3 officers, roving patrols, but 5 schools as opposed to 3 schools per officers. We think that's a reasonable approach given the budget constraints. Staffing the BOE security patrols on an OT basis is unsustainable, so a longer-term solution is needed for fiscal year '25. We are already talking and working on that, but again, at the end of the day, I will always make sure that our schools and our facilities are always protected. Fiscal year '24 budget summary. Fixed charges, 2 main ones there is OPEB, other post-employment benefits. Here are a number of changes impacting plan costs and liabilities since a prior valuation, including the following, which updated demographic data, premiums, and plan elections. And the state partnership plan versus the market trend. You may have heard that some towns and some municipalities have decided to go out of the state partnership plan. But if you look at the light blue, the difference between the light blue bar and the dark blue bar is cost avoidance. So right now, the cost avoidance for the last 5 years has been $177 million. It still works for Greenwich. And the cost avoidance for fiscal year '24 is plus $30 million. So we're going to continue to monitor the state partnership plan as well as other insurance vendors, but right now it works for Greenwich. Nathaniel Witherall. The contribution remains at $500,000. I put out an RFP for management services for Nathaniel Witherall. Created a working group, and I want to thank them for putting in a lot of work on this to evaluate. And right now they're evaluating a Lear Health Services long-term lease proposal. Currently reviewing the budget proposals. We've had site visits that have occurred both at Nathaniel Witherall and at the various Lear sites throughout New Jersey. The goal remains to continue to have a facility for our residents that maintain high-quality care while addressing these fiscal issues. As I said before, having had a lot of relatives there, having volunteered there over the years, and just been a supporter, huge supporter of it. Doesn't negate with, make you want to turn your head and wish problems away. You may have seen something I wrote in the paper, an op-ed maybe a few months ago. I talked about just in the last 9 years, we put $43 million just for a subsidy. And that doesn't include lots of other things, whether there's grievances, lawsuits, threats of lawsuits. But Nathaniel Witherell has had a lot of great positive aspects to it too. And so my goal is to get, if there ever is going to be a change, it would have to go through the RTM, Planning and Zoning, the Board of Selectmen, and first and foremost, the board at Nathaniel Witherell. So my goal is to get that board all relevant information that could help them make the best possible decision for our residents. We want to make sure that that facility is always there, providing the best possible health care, but also doing it, in the most fiscally efficient way. But healthcare comes first, and certainly they'll have all that information. The time for, kicking the can down the road has got to end. Budget summary review. You'll see there's state and federal aid, and then all others. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see what all others are. Earned interest, building permits, fire plan review, Nathaniel Witherell, municipal solid waste tipping fees. The fire plan review is new. I want to thank the fire department for coming forward with that. That's a fee that will be charged to developers who are coming in. When they come to town hall, they're always surprised that Greenwich never charged them a fee when every other town does. And what happens is our fire department spends a lot of time on those inspections. So they're getting paid back, money's coming into the general fund, and really no one's complaining. Even the people that are being charged expect to be charged. So it was never done before. So that was a find and certainly something that the fire department needs. So we want to thank them for coming forward with that. Head count. You can see there the percent changes in head count. And then the fiscal 24 head count change. What's important here is in the town general fund, there are no new full-time positions. Requesting 0.43 for the police, part-time, town's other funds. So we added one full-time employee for the sewer division. Why? Because that has been for the last 3 years I've been in office, and I know before that even, because I had a lot of friends and contractors, understaffed. And that's where we were getting the most calls. So we responded to that. The people are coming here, who already live here or moving here, they're waiting on their applications, and sometimes there's a huge wait. And that can't go on. So we want to make sure that our sewer division gets up to speed there. They do a great job, but they're understaffed. And we are responding to the citizens on that. And one part-time to full-time conversion, but it's only a 0.18 increase for the retirement fund. 8.83 part-time for Nathaniel Witherell, which is an accounting correction. Without the accounting correction, total full-time employee increase is 1.86 for the year. And the summary. So here you'll see main thing revised operating fixed charges totaling 2.3. And go to the budget summary. Again, it's you're going to see the expenses went up a little bit, but revenue did too. Budget summary. Operating budget. We have additional services with this budget. You heard about the police department with the controls, the patrols, and at the sewer department, which is something we've heard about from residents for a while. Long-range capital budget, getting projects done that are important to our community. We have to respond to that. The mill rate recognizes the impact of property taxes on our residents. We try to make Greenwich a place that people can not only continue to live here, but to retire here. And a taxpayer with a $1 million assessed home value will see $334 in increase in property taxes. So again, we want We want to keep Greenwich, Greenwich, but we also want people to live here, work here, and retire here. We don't want them moving to Florida or Carolina or Georgia. We think we have the best town in the United States, and it's all because of our great volunteers and all of you. So thank you so much for listening.
So a quick reminder, we have a table over here with forms to sign up to speak. So if you would like to speak, make sure you have a form completed and hand it off to Mr. Menarski, our town controller. Also, we have extra seats. If anyone is standing and would like to sit down, we'd just ask our friends in the audience to make sure that all seats are available if anyone would like to sit down, but we have quite a few seats here, so we ask you to join us in a seat.
Clicker? I never used the clicker. Yeah, this is just forward, back if you have to go back.
Yeah. Very basic.
I'm sure you can.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys rehearsed the slide. Yeah. And just forward when you're ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
This
We don't-
presenter view, so you have the notes and everything.
Perfect.
You see that?
Closer to the mic, Tony. We'll just,
Oh,
all right.
and I'll hand this to you, then when we're...
Okay. I was like trying to keep my notes to myself. And feel free to jump in if feel free to jump in as needed.
I have to squint just to be able to see.
I know, that's why I'm like, I have the glasses. Doesn't really help, it's a little far away.
Okay, so first I'd like to thank our first selectman, Fred Camillo, again, and we know Ben Branyan was most helpful and constructive in making sure that presentation went well. We look forward to visiting with you next Thursday, February 2nd, and in the Budget Committee's department meetings throughout February and into the first week of March. So now, we welcome Christina Downey, the Vice Chair of the Board of Education, in Chair Joe Kelly's absence, Dr. Tony Jones, Superintendent of Schools, and Blaise Leviton, who is sitting back there in the audience. He's our school's Chief Operating Officer. And so I guess Ms. Downey and Dr. Jones will be presenting the fiscal year '24 Board of Education Schools Operating and Capital Budget. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having us here tonight to the BET Budget Committee and to the general public. Blaise will be coming forward to present the capital portion, so we'll start with the operating budget. First of all, just as a reminder, when we work on the school budget, it is a 12-month process. It goes all year long. The portions that you see in yellow are where we made an adjustment this year on capital and to work closer with our partners at the town of Greenwich. And we actually had our draft capital budget done in the summer and then approved it almost a month early before we approved the operating, which was new for us. We do a lot of preparation work. We obviously look at all of our academic needs. We look at our current budget. We go back, look 10 years before, all of the previous budgets. We analyze enrollment and data projection. We look at our staffing adjustments that we may want to make going into the next year. And we also look at all of our estimated fixed cost, which is a challenge when you're building a budget a full year before this year is going to start. We also gather all of our local, state, and federal funding information. Sometimes those are unfunded mandates that come out of the legislature. So the Board of Education has approved a budget this year that's just over $182 million. And that is a 2.9% increase, just over 5.2 million, which is exactly the guidelines where we were asked to be this year.
Thank you.
As you can see, that $5.2 million, these are the components of it, the lion's share of which is salaries and transportation costs. But the year-to-year, that we'll discuss later where we have some risk areas in the budget, but this also reflects a reduction in positions of about $1 million.
It's not going.
No, you did.
It did? Okay.
Okay, so as you can see, the BET requested a 2.9% operating increase. The superintendent and the board both were able to come through and approve that. And in this slide, the areas of risk we've identified are really kind of three categories where we have some concerns about possibly being under budgeted. Those three items are utilities, substitutes, and facilities overtime. Utilities, obviously, in this inflationary environment, which we'll discuss also later in the presentation, how we came to those numbers. And the substitutes and the facilities overtime, we have been using our ARP money to help defray excess costs in those categories.
We want to talk just a little bit about our year of celebrations. What are all the great things that are happening in our schools? And, you know, we were really excited as we've watched our results over the last 2 years coming out of COVID. We did not have the COVID slide that a lot of school districts did across the country. And again, credit to all of our staff for getting buildings open and making sure that, you know, children were in school with us. So we've been very pleased with our ELA and our math results. And we want to continue to see those trending up. When we look at our college readiness, again, we've been very pleased with our advanced placement exams and what has happened. And again, as a reminder, we weren't in a normal school environment over the last few years. So it's a credit again to our staff and our students that worked so hard. We actually had more exams taken last year than we did the previous year. When we look beyond standardized tests, you know, we're really excited about a lot of the work that's happening out in the schools. And literally just, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, we had 5 students who were named Regeneron finalists, top 300 in the country. Our science research program at Greenwich High School is truly one of the best in the country. And we just found out today that 2 of those students are in the top, it's either top 30 or 40, top 40, which is just tremendous. One of the best in the country. And the picture you see at the bottom is Mr. Andy Bermonti, who was also named to the Connecticut Academy. And we are just delighted. We just found that out a week ago, which is a huge honor and a credit to his work. We also have a brand new course this year, which is Science Research Now. It's reaching down to our 8th graders. And that's been wonderful. And these students show up before school starts. It's very early in the morning. And again, these are some students who are really doing work that in most high schools you wouldn't see students doing. So we're extremely proud. We're also extremely proud of New Lebanon, who was named a School of Distinction this year for the wonderful work going on in that building. And the picture that you're looking at is a bilingual program that they've had just for a few years. And again, tremendous work going on. This is our Teacher of the Year on the left, and when you look on the right, we're so excited this year that we have the Connecticut Middle School Assistant Principal of the Year, Suzanne Coyne, who's at Western Middle School. So again, all of these are things that are happening this current school year. We're excited about our niche rankings, which has our district third in Connecticut, and more than anything, when you look across the bottom, we're at the 99.3 percentile in the entire country, in the United States. So I think as a community, we have a lot to celebrate with our school system. Now let's look at some of the student demographics and enrollment. What you're looking at in this slide is just the overall enrollment of the district. We're still well over 8,000 students. What you see on the right-hand side is actually, sorry, I can't see.
Doing this one.
Thank you.
That one.
What you see on the right-hand side, I think, it's too little. I think that one is actually our EL students, which actually is tending to grow at a slower rate than the state, which is fantastic. You'll notice the state is the dotted line right across the top. On the bottom left, you're looking at our students who qualify for free and reduced lunches. And when you see that we trended down last year, that's really attributed to the program that the USDA had for food service, and every student in all schools across America ate for free. That just expired this January. And so you're going to see that number start to go up again because families must turn in their paperwork in order to qualify. And what you see on the bottom right is our graduation rate, which continues to hold strong. And again, we should be very proud of Greenwich High School and making sure that every student leaves with a high school diploma, because if that doesn't happen, the chances are drastically reduced that they will get a high school diploma after 12th grade. This is looking at our enrollment history, going all the way back to the 1960s on the far left. What you'll notice in the middle is a big dip where Greenwich Public Schools was just over 6,000 students. The two red arrows represent when Parkway closed, which is on the left, and when Parkway reopened on the right. And what I want to really point out, because this does come up a lot in town, people will talk about Parkway. When you look at the far right in that orange, which is where we are now, we're nowhere near where we were when we closed Parkway last time and then had to turn around and reopen it. The other component is where that second arrow is on the right side is also when federal law came into place for mandated preschool. And I'll talk about preschool here in just a minute. So every time we add a preschool class, it's set for 15 students. And if we go back to 1920, previously, we would have 11 general education students and 4 special needs students in every class. And that's also required. We have to have a balanced class. You can't have just all students, for instance, with special needs. We changed that in 1920 to now have 9 general education students and 6 special needs. And this was intentional to still provide extremely high-quality programming, but also to make sure that we could try and slow the growth of preschool. When you look at our preschool numbers, next year we will have 16 sections. And when we talk about 16 sections, that's more classrooms than we have at Parkway. Our pre-K could completely fill Parkway. Had we not made that adjustment in 1920, we would be where that red, where you see the tall red bar, we would have 21 sections of preschool right now had we not made that change. And with those preschool sections, we would have needed an additional 7 teachers, 16.8 paras, well over $1 million in just preschool. Again, we're trying to be very responsible and thoughtful when we bring our budgets every single year. This is, again, just looking at preschool growth of special needs students. And what you'll notice is it's just literally in a decade, it's more than doubled. And we expect that trend to continue. And every time we add a preschool class, that's another classroom that's not available for K-5. It comes out of that rotation. So if we weren't slightly declining in enrollment, it's highly likely we would have been asking to build a preschool center like a lot of districts around us have. This is just a very quick look. We're going to look at kindergarten. The enrollment's typically driven by birth rate. And if we talk about kindergarten enrollment this current year, we were 59 students above projections, or a 10% increase. We don't know what next year is going to look like, but that can have a huge long-term effect on the trend of enrollment. Kindergarten was largely due to new families moving in, which I think we've all seen all the strollers around town and the housing sales. When you look at this chart, this is really why the district is in a slow decline. What you see in the second column is that our senior classes are generally around 700. But what's happened just the last few years is our kindergarten was coming in at 500 or 600. So just with that natural turnover, the district is slowly getting a little bit smaller. But again, on that far right, we thought we were going to be down 140 students. We're only down just over 70 because enrollment in kindergarten was higher than projected. Classrooms over time, one question people always ask, well, if we're slowly declining in enrollment, why are we not reducing in K-5 sections? We are, and it's really important for people to understand that going into next year, we will be down 20 classrooms or 20 sections in our K-5 enrollment. We've been able to do that naturally. When somebody retires, you don't replace the position. Somebody moves, we don't replace the position. So we haven't had to lay people off in order to reduce 20 sections. And this, again, just has to do with declining enrollment, but we have been reducing sections. The aspect that people don't understand is every time we reduce a section right now, that section gets added in preschool. So that's why you don't see an overall decline in our staffing. This is what K-5 is anticipated to look like. You'll see there's a very small dip, and it is projected to start climbing again, go right back up. Same thing for middle school. It'll have a slight decline. Then that elementary group, where that's going back up, will come through the middle school. And then this is high school. And then high school, if you go far enough out, you'll see again, elementary goes up, middle school goes up, high school, if we could go out farther, would start going up again.
So now we'll talk about the components of the operating budget. As you can see from this pie chart, obviously salaries are significant, along with our special education and transportation expenses. Those account for 88% of our annual operating costs. And obviously the salary costs, obviously this is what we do, right? Classroom teachers, paraprofessionals, all the people we need to deliver instruction. I think it's noteworthy that a very small percentage, under 3%, goes to administration. Then we also have our transportation expense. For those of you who aren't aware, we are required by state law to provide transportation to private school students. We also have our special education transportation as well as our own students. So those are the different components shown here. The school lunch fund is a separate revolving fund, so these numbers are not directly in our operating budget, but obviously it's clear that our expenses are our personnel to deliver the food or prepare the food and the food itself, and we have revenues from sales and from the government. This is a very interesting chart. This shows our historical budget trends, and you can kind of see that, for a period of time, our operating budgets really hovered at around the 4% mark for the most part. About 10 years ago, before probably a lot of us were involved in anything in this room, there was clearly a shift to pushing the budgets, the Board of Ed operating budgets to in the 2%. So as a result, given our staff costs, that personnel and salary costs being potentially above 2%, we have had to decrease other elements of our budget. This, decrease things like professional development or curriculum development or wherever we can afford to cut costs. Special education tuition. This is really for our out-of-district placements for students where we do everything possible to provide a proper education in the district, but there are always some students who need more than the Greenwich Public Schools can provide. So we have a number of students that are placed out of the district, and they're categorized differently at outplacements and settlements. Settlements it refers to litigation, yes, but that's a very small number. The settlement figure includes students who are placed out of district in a facility that is not a Connecticut state-approved facility, for example, an out-of-state facility. So because the settlements number is high, it doesn't necessarily mean there's massive litigation. We have our buildings. Obviously, there are cost component to those. So Electricity, as you can see, is how most of our buildings use the energy. And we're taking steps to do whatever we can to control those costs going forward. We're involved in a program with Eversource. We are doing an audit of the electricity program, and there's virtual net metering. So we are putting a lot of effort into seeing what we can do to contain those costs, particularly in this environment. Electricity, as we were just saying, this is an example of one of these risk or challenge areas we're concerned about in the budget for next year, and this explains it, because the BET guidelines had originally indicated that we should plan on utilities going up 54%. However, we have only built in 27.2 for our electricity costs in the operating budget before the BET right now. After we passed our budget, or give or take around the same time, the town has a negotiated rate for a 38% increase. So there's a lot of numbers moving around. The increase in our budget is $665,000, but we are concerned that obviously that is going to be under budgeted. We're certainly taking every steps also to contain those costs, light timer sensors, et cetera, as well as dealing with the electric companies. Budget priorities. Okay. As we were developing the budget, we obviously have to keep our schools on track with our curriculum management plan. Dr. Jones and her team have done a tremendous job the last couple of years really focusing on that. Development fully funded so that our teachers have the tools they need to deliver the best possible instruction to our students. So as we said, the challenges. Obviously, it's a high inflationary period. I don't think that's news to anyone in the room. But given our salary and other, obviously, utility increases, we are basically, the budget, the 2.9% is not a level services budget. There are some reductions in the budget. So that's one of the challenges. Obviously, I've spoken about the concern about the utility costs. One of the other areas we're concerned about is the cost of substitute teachers, as we've had a lot of health issues with COVID-19. Attracting and retaining substitute teachers has been a challenge. We've been fortunate to have ARP money to help defray those costs, as we've had to pay more and incentivize substitutes. But as we go forward, that will continue to be a challenge. The special education, while we think we are moving on a forward path as we implement other programs and assess co-teaching and all the things that Dr. Heigenthaler has assessed, we may have some unforeseen expenses. And facility staffing overtime involves our custodians in our schools. For example, we still are doing a very high level of cleaning and disinfecting when the circumstances warrant it, but we also have facility staff who themselves are sick or out, and other staff members have to cover their responsibilities. So there can be overtime costs associated with that. And kindergarten, I guess until we see registration next year, this year we had a 10% increase. We could have the same again. I guess we'll see how many people have moved into town. School supplies and services, we have a per pupil allocation that goes to every building, and it's $265 per student that is used in every building. It has been $265 for 10 years. That number is not increased. That is the blue line. The red line shows you, impacted by inflation, what that dollar amount has done on a per pupil basis in our buildings for the last 10 years. Staff adjustments. So in the operating budget, we have, you can see on the right-hand side, we have added some positions, but we've also reduced more positions than we've added. And so a net total reduction of 8.25 certified staff and 5.1 non-certified staff, which translates into $1,040,000 in salary and $250,000 in benefits. And that is all reflected in the numbers presented earlier. Revenue to the town of Greenwich is, the school district does bring in some revenue for the town. We have our special education various cost sharing grants. We have tuition for preschool. We have Medicaid reimbursements. And I want to give a particular note to Dr. Heigenthaler, who has really diligently been working on getting our outplacements and settlements categorized well to maximize the reimbursements and to increase the Medicaid reimbursements to really help the town's income on those categories.
Hang on, Jill.
And just very quickly, in the guidelines, we were asked to look at consolidated services. It is something that we do every single year. Our staff, senior staff, met with Town of Greenwich staff and several different departments. And basically, we are consolidated in so many areas. It's difficult to find additional consolidations, again, because we don't look like most school districts. We are already consolidated. Our grounds are already managed by Park and Rec. Our purchasing still funnels all through the same place. It goes through the town ultimately, everything that we buy. So again, we consolidate where it makes sense and we don't where it doesn't, simply because we are working with 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, and there are some things that just don't work in partnering with town government. But again, we are very consolidated in so many areas. And we just want to always take this time to say thank you to the community partners. Again, Greenwich should be so proud of how many community partners we have who not only invest in grants for educational purposes, but food insecurity, supports for families. It is absolutely phenomenal, the support that we have in Greenwich. And at this time, we'll invite Blaise, if you'll come and present the capital budget.
Hello, everybody. Okay, I'll quickly go through the Board of Ed's 2024 capital budget. So just real quickly, the Board of Ed had significant effort this year to really work with the town. The whole goal, as you heard earlier, was to shift voting on capital to an earlier time frame so we could get it over to the first selectman's office, have some data requests, go back and forth, and really try to get our 15-year plan and our project sheets into really good shape so that it would be something that would, really partner with the town and kind of work together on. The main focus of the capital request this year is prioritizing the funding of major projects and, really making sure we're doing what we need to for maintenance and working on some accessibility. And we did, as a start of this process, a really detailed review of our open capital and checking with our departments on their ability to execute. We're coming out of COVID, so there's been a lot of disruptions in, the capital work program, but they're really catching up, and Dan Watson is back there. He's doing a great job with his team. We basically worked, you'll see, to prioritize the major projects over the next 5 years. We worked to significantly reduce the overstated capital. You'll see on our project sheets with our submission, each project sheet includes the cost avoidance that was removed in that major project. So instead of replacing HVAC in a building that we would be proposing to replace or do a major renovation in the next year. And together that gives us a capital program, for providing a high quality school system. Really quickly, basically just this chart shows with our open capital, it's good to have context of what we're talking about when we're talking about open capital. Given that we have about 16 weeks a year to execute almost all of it, you can see that we kind of have an execution rate. Most of our historic prior year capital has either been fully executed, and if you exclude the money that was appropriated on July 1st of this year, the Board of Ed has executed, about 83% of their open capital budget that they have right now. You'll see if you're looking at the 15-year approved budget for the next 5 years, you heard, I think, a lot of talk about prioritizing. over the next 5 years, you'll see the shifts from what was approved in the BET RTM final budget in '23 for the 15-year plan versus what is in the Board of Ed's submission this year for the next 5 years. So really, overall, shifting of priorities and reducing that 5-year request by nearly 17%. So really trying to listen to, what the boards are talking about and show that we're good partners on that front. The total request for capital that the Board of Ed submitted to the town was $121 million. 90% of that is 2 projects: Central Middle School replacement, Old Greenwich major renovation. All the rest of the entire capital program is the remaining 10%. So really, there was a lot of conversation about shifting maintenance so we could focus on executing our current projects that we have right now, as well as working together to make room to fund the major renovations that we all know that we need. So you'll see that the board really had a lot of extensive conversations on listening to prioritizing so that we can work to try to get some of these projects to a point where we can get them funded and get the community what they need. Here we just show that basically since the original master plan that the board had done, that's about 6 years old, versus what is in our submission today, has been reduced by nearly 50%. The longer that some of these projects have been delayed, the higher the cost keeps getting, and really the less value that the district is going to get for those projects because the scope keeps getting smaller and smaller. So that just kind of shows how over the last few years these projects' scope have changed to really prioritize on the maintenance. Major project, Central Middle School replacement. As First Selectman Camillo mentioned, the Board of Ed had $85.5 million. This was using a number of 700 square feet. The ed specs are 115,311 square feet. So this is an all-in pricing. We had already had $2.5 million appropriated in the '23 budget. So using this same logic, that would bring us to about $83 million using a square foot model. The building committee, they've got a lot of people doing really hard work. There is no design right now informing that. We don't know what the materials are. We don't have any schematic design. So there really is not an exact dollar amount because the architect just got up and running this month. So we expect a lot of information really over the next 8 weeks as the building committee gets up and running with their architect. Old Greenwich was included in the fiscal year '24 request for the Board of Ed. This was at $24.5 million. This project avoids, basically we remove $6.8 million in maintenance at the facility if we fund the major renovation. There's a real need. It was, as First Selectman Camillo mentioned, 1902 it was built. It's not ADA compliant. This is a constant issue at this school, literally having to move kids in their entire classrooms to the first floor, move people around in the middle of the year. It's really a challenge. It is an iconic structure of the OG community. The scope from the KDG master plan that the Board of Ed did has been reduced to really prioritize the core needs of the facility. There is a building committee. They're up and running. They confirmed to the board when we were submitting that they are on time to us for their fiscal year '24 appropriation. The next one is a major project is Julian Curtis. We have basically a building committee that is up and running. They're a great group of volunteers. They are taking a fiscal year '23 kind of a bunch of, I'll say, elements that were funded, ADA, an elevator, a couple of other kind of random projects that were put in. We have a building committee up and running to coordinate those. Basically, they have an RFP out to engage an architect to take the ed specs that were originally approved for the facility, take the funding, and then kind of merge it with the core needs of the building. Fiscal year '24 includes $850,000. This is to create an accessible and secure front entrance at the school, as well as $50,000 to design their cafeteria. You can see in that chart that they have a severely undersized cafeteria at Julian Curtis. Trying to keep the PowerPoint moving here. Riverside, we also included in the Board of Ed submission, fiscal year '24, $150,000 to do ed specifications and preliminary design to get the process started for a major renovation. Again, the Board of Ed reduced the scope for the next 5 years in prioritization to really try to focus this program on the core needs of the building, to address things like the fact that it's not ADA compliant, it has an undersized cafeteria and main office, we have school security things that really need to be addressed, as well as focusing on HVAC and air quality. The Board of Ed included 2 technology investments, a BOE disaster recovery plan for $1.28 million. Right now, the Board of Ed faces a real significant risk of failure. There's basically 1 point of failure that could take down the entire Board of Ed system. So our IT department has worked really hard to establish a proposal that would create multiple connections and would allow a school to stay online even if the rest of the network went down. Multiple schools could have their own backups and stay online, and other pieces of the system could go down. So one school system going down, for example, wouldn't have to affect every single school in the system. And then we also included GHS cellular improvements. This was changed from last year to be phased. And this really addresses some really serious security concerns, the fact that in large swaths of the Greenwich High School there is absolutely no cell service, and this is a proposal to provide efficient cell service through the entire building, including the basement. And I know I was speaking really fast, but trying to be mindful of the time. We worked really hard. The board basically is trying to have a collaborative approach, really work with the town, work with the First Selectman's office, take the facilities master plan that the Board of Education had done, had a study of all the facilities, take the town's 15-year capital planning process, take the current status that things are right now, as well as what we really need, and put something together. This will be an ongoing conversation. We really right now are focusing on the fact that we have significantly aging infrastructure. There are more federal and state mandates. There's some new ones coming out about HVAC, which is something we know we'll be talking about through the budget process. And we have a lot of non-compliant and buildings that aren't accessible, and it's time to really work together and fix those. So we expect a lot of information coming out in the next few weeks from the building committees, and I'll just sum it up here on this final slide that, basically our operating budget is a 2.9% increase, and the Board of Ed's capital was at $121 million, which we recognized was a significant request, but, we spoke at length on why that was critical. And a version of this PowerPoint too will be posted on the website, sent to UP and BET and the board members, and will be available online. So thank you, and that was fast, but looking forward to the conversation.
So thank you, Christina, Tony, and Blaise. We look forward to working with you during the budget meetings. This year's school kickoff, department meetings will start next Tuesday, January 31st. So I remind everyone that in order to speak at tonight's public hearing, you need to sign up. We have forms over there on the table, and Pete Minarski is taking the forms, and Laura is assembling them. So we now come to the public hearing section. Your comments will be taken in order signed up. We look forward to listening to your input. Written comments do not need to be repeated. The forms link will be open through the remainder of this public hearing, or 11:59 p.m., whichever is earlier. All forms, after redacting private information, including email addresses and telephone numbers, will be posted on the BET Budget Committee webpage for the presentation and public hearing. So we would appreciate if you are not repetitive with previous speakers and do not repeat remarks submitted in writing through the form. Laura will call out the names of the speaker and then the follow-on speaker who should be prepared to speak next. Public speakers are limited to 3 minutes, which will be dead stop. Pete Minarski is the timekeeper. Each speaker is asked to introduce themselves and their organization or their resident address. Please accommodate the large number of fellow speakers and be efficient with your time. If not needed, don't use the full time provided. If a topic has been raised, do not repeat it, only bring up new topics or issues. We thank you for your interest and for participating in the fiscal year 24 budget process. We value our dialogue with you, our fellow town citizens. Laura will call the name of the speaker and the speaker to follow. Please be ready when your name is called. Thank you.
All right, and I'll just add to Leslie's opening remarks is when you come to the podium, please don't forget to press the button so GCTV can hear your comments. The first speaker is Jen Bensavengo, to be followed by Jody Stewart.
Good evening. I do want to let you know that we provided a packet as well of quotes and letters from our students at Old Greenwich School. My name is Jen Bensavengo, and I am a 25-year veteran educator in the Greenwich Public Schools and the proud principal of Old Greenwich School. This is the 5th time in as many years I've stood before you requesting funding for all of our schools' much-needed renovation and expansion projects. As a teacher, I feel compelled to give a brief history lesson. January 26, 1992 was a turning point date in our history for millions of U.S. citizens with disabilities. In 1992, I was 17 years old, and compliance of Title II of the American Disabilities Act went into effect, requiring state and local governments to give people with disabilities an equal opportunity to benefit from all of their programs, services, and activities. In 48 hours, it'll be the 31st anniversary of this compliance date, and yet our schools are still woefully out of compliance. We currently have a student at Old Greenwich who was injured skiing this December. He has not been able to access his classroom on the 3rd floor with his friends. His cast prohibits him from climbing the 77 steps from the ground floor to his classroom each day, leaving him limited to a wheelchair on the ground floor of the school with a substitute teacher. Other students with permanent physical limitations have to be turned away at times. And often, we have to offer options of more accessible schools in Greenwich to attend. In 2023, as an educator and a mother, it is unconscionable to think a child with a physical limitation 33 years after ADA was passed is not able to attend their neighborhood school. Shameful. Our students have asked when we're going to have a renovation, when our friend will come back to the classroom, when we can stop wearing coats in the middle of winter in class and close our windows again, because that's our only ventilation option at Old Greenwich. And we consider adequate ventilation a necessity, not a nice to have. But I'm not going to wax poetic tonight about our basic requests of an accessible, adequately ventilated, safe, sewage-free school. I'm going to ask you to please continue the commitment you made to support the next steps in our renovation. Please adequately fund Old Greenwich in fiscal year 24 and ensure that we are able to continue on the architectural engineer and design process that we have begun. Our incredible building committee has worked tirelessly to make this happen and to meet some timelines for this group. And we're trusting the students, the taxpayers, and the parents behind me are trusting that you are going to commit to making a difference for our people. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Jody Stewart, to be followed by Candace Garthwaite. Certainly.
It's on green. Okay, so I don't need to push it every time, I think. It's on green? Okay, good evening. Candace Garthwaite. I live on Park Avenue in Old Greenwich. And I'm representing hundreds of Greenwich pickleball players. I'm asking for your support for 4 new dedicated pickleball courts behind Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, the Cohen Center. Pickleball popularity continues to grow, and the need for dedicated pickleball courts has only increased since last time we were before you. Currently, there are only 2 dedicated courts in all of Greenwich. This is an important $375,000 capital item, and the Civic Center location has many benefits. The proposed courts are near the existing tennis courts and far from residential neighbors. The site is under construction, resulting in possible construction cost savings. There will be lights to allow for extended playing time. There is parking. I often play pickleball on the hybrid courts at Laughlin Park and Cos Cob, and it's great to see the expansion of pickleball players from college kids to families and Cos Cob neighbors. Pickleball is an accessible sport that cuts across age, gender, athletic ability, and socioeconomic class. You can think retired men's association to Western Middle School students because they are taking pickleball. So this is a great town investment in the physical, emotional, and social well-being of town residents. The project information sheet describes the 4-fold increase in pickleball programming revenue from the fiscal years 2017 to 2022, with a steep increase most recently. Town clinics and open play fill up immediately, resulting in long wait lists. Last spring, there were over 100 on the wait list. With more dedicated pickleball courts, Parks and Rec can offer more programming and generate more revenue.
30 seconds.
The 2 tennis courts behind the Civic Center, I played on the 2 tennis courts behind the Civic Center last Sunday, and there were 20 pickleball players. Pickleball is social and so much fun. Thank you for your support for pickleball.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Jody Stewart, to be followed by Francis Wu Nobe.
Hope tonight is a good evening. I'm Jody Stewart, West Elm Street. I am the Greenwich pickleball advocate for over 800 players. We are so far behind satisfying the pickleball players in our community. A year ago, I spoke to 10 Park and Rec directors in neighboring towns. They all had outdoor dedicated pickleball courts, averaging $500,000 to build 4 courts. Recently, I spoke to those directors again. They have more dedicated and hybrid pickleball courts on their town park tennis courts. A few examples. Fairfield put hybrid lines on 31 of their 34 tennis courts. Tunis Hill Park has 4 pickleball courts. They have 8 dedicated pickleball courts in their capital budget over the next few years. Norwalk, who just put in 4 dedicated pickleball courts on 3 tennis courts for $524,000, are looking for another location, money out of their capital budget. Milford last year had 8, now 12 dedicated and 4 hybrid pickleball courts, looking for 4 more dedicated pickleball courts out of their capital budget. And my favorite, Trumbull. Last year, 6 dedicated at Unity and 2 hybrid at Tashwell Knolls, which they are upgrading to 6 dedicated pickleball courts, costing $850,000 plus $200 for lights out of their capital budget. They will have 18 dedicated pickleball courts in each area of town. They say, you build them and the people will come. Pickleball has impacted tourism and the town's revenue impact. Their population, 36,827. So what do these towns have in common? They have pickleball in their town parks. And most pickleball community was demanding of courts players to $36 million in 1 year. CNBC. Are you in?
Francis Wu Nobe is next, to be followed by Charlene Ray.
Good evening. My name is Frances Wu Nobe, Mama 3 Greenwich Public School Kids, and the 2022-2023 President of the Greenwich Public Schools Parent Teacher Advisory Council. PTAC is a nonpartisan, nonprofit umbrella organization which includes the PTAs from all 15 public schools in Greenwich. We are 100 parent volunteers organized around 17 committees supporting academics, facilities and buildings, curriculum enrichment, special ed, and more. Please join your neighborhood school PTA today. PTAC's here to advocate for your approval of the Board of Education's fiscal year budgets for operations and for capital projects. You'll also hear from PTA parents Claire Kilgallen, Bob Cheney, Dean Urso, and more, who will advocate for the BET to fully fund the capital budget requests for Central Middle School, the Western Middle School Fields Remediation, the Greenwich High School Vestibule Safety Security Project, and the Old Greenwich Building Rehabilitation. The town of Greenwich has not made significant capital investments in these schools in years, decades in some cases, and now it's the critical time that we do that. Turning to the proposed operating budget, the BET gave the BOE and the school district guidance to bring forward a budget that's no more than 2.9% above last year's budget. The BOE and the school district have done that. The operating budget submitted meets the BET guidance. It's important to note that this has been achieved in spite of an inflationary economic environment and a new teacher's contract that gives the professional educators in our town a very well-deserved pay increase. It's also important to keep in mind that this was enabled through continuing, though very soon to end, benefits from federal American Recovery Act funds and by eliminating 16 GPS positions. This 2.9% should not be seen as an increase. It should be seen for what it is, a net reduction. Everyone in Greenwich recognizes the value to our children and to our property values. We urge the BET to approve the GPS operating budget as presented. We're aware that at times in past, the BET has given budget guidance only to have the final approved budget lower than the guidance. Let's be sure that doesn't happen this year. We all appreciate Greenwich's good credit rating, including me, relatively low tax rate, high property values, and first-rate schools. And we must keep our eyes on the role that these first-rate schools play underpinning those property values. Please approve the BOE budgets with the caution that if we continue these bare-bone budgets, it's the children who lose. For those celebrating, today is day 3 of Chinese New Year, and traditionally a day to stay home with loved ones and avoid public speaking due to the risk of evil spirits fomenting arguments. I'm counting on no arguments today, just a speedy bipartisan support. 新年快乐, Happy Year of the Rabbit, and thank you for all you do for the town of Greenwich.
Charlene Ray is next, to be followed by Tim Bussler.
Press the green button. Oh, this. Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Charlene Ray. I've lived in this town about 13 years. I live in Central Greenwich, and I am here representing the seniors of this town. What I'm going to talk to you about is, I'm not sure if people are familiar with it, but they had a program in this town for years called Share the Fare, which means that Greenwich seniors bought vouchers and they paid half and they got double the amount to use Greenwich Taxi. Well, last January, a letter was sent out to all seniors saying if you had any taxi tickets, to use them up by June, because we will not be using Greenwich Taxi anymore. We're going to have a new program July 1st. So July 1st came, and they didn't have the program. August, September, October, November, December, January. We still do not have a program. So I'm here trying to advocate and see if they could start up a program again for the Greenwich seniors. And that really helps because, as we all know, taxis are very expensive. And they, from what I was told, they were speaking to Lyft and Uber, and that isn't going to work for whatever reason. And Lori Contadino is in charge of that. And I spoke with Fred about it briefly. He's aware of this issue. And I was at the senior center last week. They still don't have a program going. They don't know what they're going to do. And I'm wondering if they could possibly take some of that $2.5 million that Mrs. Wallace left and use a little portion to get this program going. First of all, there's only one taxi in this town, Greenwich Taxi. I doubt if we're going to have any more. So they had a program. It worked with them for a number of years. Why can't we go back to Greenwich Taxi again if we're not going to Lyft and Uber? I mean, what else is left? Either have nothing or have something. They also, at the senior center, used to take people on to Walmart and to ShopRite. Every week they did one or the other. They stopped that too. So apparently there really aren't funds to do these things for seniors. This town is a wonderful town. There's lots of opportunities for everyone in this town, with children, with elderly people, with people that have income problems, but I don't really personally see that much going on for seniors. I'm wondering if they could look at this and get that program going now, because I contacted Lori Contadino at least 5 times, and I sent copies to Fred also about it. And, okay, so if we could try to get this going and actually also have some day trips. They used to go on a day trip now and then. They, go to see the Rockettes or something. There's nothing like that anymore, nothing at all. So if you could please try to find, we want an affordable, reliable transportation system to maintain the quality of life for seniors. Please look into that, because it seems like it's going nowhere. It's a year now since they knew they weren't having this program. And like I said, I reiterate it one more time, we only have one taxi. Let's use them.
Thank you.
Tim Bustler to be followed by Luke Zimzak.
I'm Tim Bustler, RTC District 11. Greenwich residents are asking, how does the town of Greenwich justify increasing property assessments in flooded neighborhoods without having a plan to improve their outdated drainage system? How many mid-Greenwich properties will have to be declared now inside the expanding Brothers Brook flood zone before DPW releases their flood study and gets to work improving the flow of water off our roads, under our bridges, and away from our neighborhoods? The DPW drainage presentation last week did not answer these questions, but hundreds of homeowners with hundreds of millions of dollars of assessed property value are expecting improvement to decades of neglected drainage infrastructure. On September 1st, 2021, it was not 8 inches of rainfall that flooded our homes on Echo Lane, 2 of which remain still unoccupied, but rather millions of gallons of water that moved from other neighborhoods on the surface of town roads and waterways to accumulate to reach 4 feet overnight. During the drainage presentation, we heard that one of the things DPW likes to say is, where are we moving the puddle? We can't make a negative impact on another area. We can't just move the puddle. But what happens to the neighborhoods where DPW has already moved the puddle? And worse, allowed the puddle to become 4 feet deep. That water moved into our neighborhood, accumulated, and failed to flow outward due to inadequate road drains, unmaintained debris-clogged waterways, and bridges at Ridgeview and North Street that became choke points and outdated and under-capacity flow levels. The neighborhood within Echo Lane, Andrews, Hillside, and Francine is the bottom of a bathtub that DPW supplied. That water moved down North Street, Parsonage, Ridgeview, Husted, and North Maple, and the town abetted the drainage problem with uphill development permitting and even the addition of a dike around the Ridgeview field that was once a simple peat bog that served as a helpful catch basin. Our neighborhood groups are working together towards mutually beneficial incremental drainage improvements. We've sought the help of the First Selectman's Office and know that there is $5.75 million in DPW budget items for North Street Bridge rebuild, highway maintenance, and stormwater drainage that can target our neighborhoods. But we need the BET to support us, as DPW has still not shared the flood study and their drainage presentation. Here are a few recommendations. The BET Budget Committee could ask the First Selectman to submit the flood study and the drainage presentation with his budget. Second, the BET should make sure that engineering plans for bridge repairs and drainage projects that are currently in budget or in progress must include increases for water capacity. Thank you.
Luke Simzak, to be followed by Bob Cheney. Is Luke here?
Luke's not here. Can I read his things?
Tim, do you think he might come a little later? I mean, I know he's planning to get, should we just give you,
I can finish in 1 minute. He's just going to read the rest of these recommendations.
so do you think we should just wait a few minutes and if he doesn't return,
Sure.
we'll give you another chance if you
Sure.
don't mind hanging around?
Not at all.
Okay, thank you.
So Bob Cheney would be next, to be followed by Lucy Von Brockel. I should say Bob Cheney and company.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Bob Cheney, and I'm speaking this evening not only as a concerned parent of a current student and future student at Central Middle School, but as a board member of PTAC where I oversee facilities. This evening, I want to urge the BET to fully fund the capital budget request for Central Middle School, the Western Middle School field remediation, the Greenwich High School vestibule security project, and the Old Greenwich building rehabilitation. Before I speak about those items, let me briefly speak about Riverside. This is yet another school that is not ADA compliant. There is no elevator, among other issues. It also has major capacity issues and has the lowest square footage per K-5 student in the district. There are also faculty members who have no classroom space to teach their classes in the media, and they teach their classes in the media center. Riverside has been pushed aside for far too long, and that needs to stop. The BET needs to approve the $150,000 Riverside School building study in the BOE's capital budget. The budget also needs to be approved for the remediation of the toxic fields at Western Middle School. The Western Middle School fields have been shut down for 6 years now and are not accessible to the students or the community. We need to fix this. That the community came out and forced to support this project at the state hearing on January 11th shows that the remediation of the fields is what the community wants and should therefore be approved. The BET also needs to approve the Greenwich High School vestibule security project as well as the Old Greenwich building rehabilitation project. I'm told, by the way, that the building committee for OG is running very smoothly, and I wanted to thank the BOE for approving the Old Greenwich architect. All of these projects are urgently needed and deserve to be fully funded this year. The last project that needs approval is Central Middle School. There has been a lot of misinformation floating around regarding the Central Middle School project. It seems that there are members of the BET that want to shrink the size of the CMS building and are using misinformation to further this goal. This is not acceptable and, frankly, embarrassing to have misinformation spread under the guise of authority. There was mention of a steep cost escalation. There has been no cost escalation. There's talk about current student numbers being low. The number of students does not matter. The number of classrooms is actually the key consideration. And the plan is for the new building to have 30 classrooms. The classrooms at the current building are only 600 square feet, much smaller than present-day classroom design. The average number of students per classroom at CMS is currently 24, which means the rooms in the new school need to be at least 800 square feet. Look, Central Middle School was built in the 1950s. They didn't allocate for special ed space or a large media center. As I just mentioned, they also did not take into account the larger classroom sizes. We're in the beginning phases with Central Middle School. No one really knows what the final design will call for. What is known is that the community needs everyone on the Central Middle School Building Committee working together to deliver the best new middle school for our students. I urge the BET to fully fund the capital budget request for Central Middle School and stop playing politics with our children's future. We, as a town, are better than this. Thank you, and have a good night.
Lucy Von Brockel, to be followed by Brian Jacoby.
Hi there. I'm Lucy Von Brockel. I live in Byram. I'm on the RTM, but I'm speaking for myself tonight. I've been coming to these meetings for a number of years. as you guys know. And I am struck every year by how much passion there is in these comments, and later how little is actually heard from these comments. So tonight, I would like to make a couple of points. One is that we're 5 years into a public school master facilities plan and have barely anything to show for it. So to hear tonight that Old Greenwich School might be pushed off another year because we can't do multiple projects at the same time is heartbreaking and a little infuriating, particularly when, tonight we've talked about reducing subsidies for the elderly in our community. We've talked about the funds for our schools, and we're also talking about projects like parks and skating rinks, which are very important, and I honestly 100% support, but if we can't do the important stuff, we shouldn't do the nice-to-haves at the moment. And the important stuff are our schools, our elderly, the vulnerable people in our community, and we really need to move forward with all of those. Thank you.
The next speaker is Brian Jacoby, to be followed by Mary Tobin.
Good evening, BET members. My name is Brian Jacoby, and I'm a proud father of 3 kids who attend Greenwich Public Schools. My wife Erica and I are both products of and advocates of healthy public school systems. We moved to Old Greenwich from New York 7 years ago for this great community, but more importantly for the public schools. On a rainy day in Old Greenwich School, you might find sewage overflowing in the lower level classrooms. On my most recent parent-teacher visit, Principal B was apologizing to new parents for the stench that reminded us of New York City gutters on 100-degree days. You will find a non-compliant entryway that's been talked about that is unsettling during an era of school shootings or for the disabled. And finally, the pandemic only highlighted our need for a baseline ventilation system. In short, the building is dilapidated and excessively depreciated. I have a financial background taught me about people and organizations. The best leaders tend to wear bifocals. They keep one eye on the near term, but they never lose sight of the long term. Conversely, the worst management teams and leaders, which were the ripest for turnarounds, allocate capital reactively and not proactively. These organizations lack milestones, transparency, and accountability, a classic formula for wealth destruction. For OGS's front door, does the town need to see more complaints to the civil rights team? Do we need a roof to fall down like a sister school to get funding for a facility? Do we need to wait until a first grader gets sick from a potential exposure to bacteria to address flooding issues? Look, the short-term outlook is confusing. It's an original time. There's no playbook for a post-pandemic period. There's headwinds all over the place, hyperinflation, inflation and overheads, the never-ending chorus of demands for capital like this one. But no environment is perfect. When money was loose and growth rampant, we asked when the good times are going to end. From Old Greenwich School's eyes, the BET didn't spend the maintenance capital when money was basically free. And now we're told that the pool of capital is limited and won't support maintenance in 2023. While we all love a low mill rate, we can't expect to uphold our quality of life or real estate values when core education infrastructure is falling apart. Just in the last 2 years, the committee did approve funding for ed specs and architecture. And if this funding was committed or even soft-circled, did we line up a financing commitment? Are we just trying to kick the can down the road with this 2024 rhetoric? Hopefully not. Look, whether you live north or south of 95, we all want high property values. Otherwise, your financially mobile neighbors might actually flee. Connecticut doesn't have a 0% income tax rate anymore, like it did in the 90s.
30 seconds.
Okay. However, there is a reason that Fairfield County still enjoys the highest population growth in a shrinking state in the recent decade, and that's not taxes, it's best-in-class schools and great communities to raise families. So let's work together to ensure our communities get base needs, not wants, and the value of our homes hold up, because the next buyer of your home is going to care about that school. With remote working, the risk is real that those buyers are going to be seduced by state-of-the-art schools in other towns like Darien or Westport. Thank you.
Mary Tobin, to be followed by Hillary Hirosh.
Good evening. My name is Mary Tobin. I live in Old Greenwich. I am on the RTM for District 6, but I'm speaking for myself this evening. I would like to speak in support of full funding for the renovation of Old Greenwich School. 3.5 years ago, my family moved to my husband's hometown for the great community of people who live here, for the parks and natural beauty, and especially for the excellent public schools. My son Dylan is now a second grader at OGS, and we have been so appreciative of the excellent teaching staff, administration, and the special education support team. Last year, I spoke to you all about my son's first grade classroom. The bathroom floods with raw sewage every time there is a big storm. I said then that I believe we can do better, and we have. Thanks to the funding support of the BET and RTM and the hard work of the OGS Building Committee, we have made real progress. Ed specs have been drafted and an architectural firm has been selected and approved with unanimous support of the Board of Education. As a town, we have taken these tangible steps forward and must continue on this path. Our classrooms need to be brought up to date with proper ventilation and adequate spaces for all children to learn, whatever their needs. My son is receiving excellent support services for the special ed staff, some of whom have to work with children out of a broom closet. We can do better. And with the horror in Uvalde in the all too near past, it is deeply unsettling for me knowing that my child's school does not yet have a secure entrance. We must continue to prioritize investing in the health, safety, and quality of learning for our children. Their health and safety cannot wait another year. I believe in the many people in our town who volunteer their time and talent, many of whom are in this room tonight, coming together to find solutions to these challenges. We must support their efforts by investing in the infrastructure required so that we can bring the spaces where our children learn up to date, up to code, and up to the standards that we have all come to expect and appreciate in our wonderful town. I want to thank you for your service to Greenwich and for your consideration of this matter. Thank you.
Next, we have Hillary Hirosh, to be followed by Steph Cowie.
Is it on? It's on. Okay. My name is Hillary Hirosh, and I'm an RTM for District 10 and a delegate for Town Services. Now, I have a truck that's about 15 years old. Now, this car has seen my children grow up in it, and my daughter even crashed it right through the garage door, learning to drive. It has massive mileage, and it just keeps going. Now, I really pride myself on being a cheapskate about things like that due to my humble beginnings. However, we have some pushing the age limit on some critical vehicles in our fire department, and I am concerned about a few things. For example, Ladder 5. It's an aerial truck. It's 22 years old, installed in 2001. Now, the build time, if we order it now, is about 2 to 3 years because of the delays. So the age at replacement will be about 25, 26 years. So the warning on that is that it's 5 years too old beyond replacement standards. Engine 11. It's over 101,000 miles. The age is 19 years old, install date 2004. The build time is about, again, 2 to 3 years right now. Age at replacement leaves it at 20 to 23 years. So the warning, again, it's 2 years over replacement age with a lot more mileage over the max. Now, me being a proud cheapskate means I drive these trucks to the ground. Like, why not? But here's the problem with that. I did a cost analysis, and no surprise, the bulk of the expenses occur towards the last 5 years of the older vehicle, about 25%. We have staffing and turn time issues with fleet maintenance. It's been a very big challenge, not easy to find qualified diesel mechanics around here. And now we are taking chances with vehicles that we know are past their age and mileage limit in a stressed maintenance situation. And that is where the risk of equipment malfunction can happen. Lives at risk, of course, there's no price you put on that, but could there be expensive lawsuits, damage due to accidents when we were pushing too far to the brink? During a fire, can an aerial ladder fail to reach windows? An engine loses the ability to pump water. I found articles about brakes completely failing in aged out, repaired engines. For example, a firefighter died. In addition, one of the main vendors, Pierce, went up 20% since COVID and another 6% recently, possibly expecting to raise prices again. So I hope the 2 new replacement vehicles will be considered for all of our safety. So back onto my cheapskate with pride theme, the Round Hill all-volunteer fire department. I want to thank the BET for continuing to work with them on their desperately needed renovation and annual budget.
30 seconds.
This group of volunteers is providing an extremely valuable and really cost-effective service to our town and District 10. Supporting our volunteers is so important. Currently, with over 15 active volunteers, most of which are now white tag, the highest training level, the response times are better than ever, and they even raised over $1.2 million on their own towards the new firehouse. That makes a cheapskate like me really proud of them. Thank you, BET, for supporting them in the future. Thank you.
Steph Cowie to be followed by Matthew McCabe.
Nothing. Just gonna go up. Sorry about the delay. All right. Good evening, Chairwoman Tarkington and committee members. My name is Steph Cowie. I'm a 22 resident of Greenwich, Connecticut. I am here this evening in support of the Board of Ed capital budget as presented. Tonight, I would like to stress the importance of access. I ask you for your support for the following projects. Old Greenwich School. It is 2022 and this elementary school is not ADA compliant. This partial renovation and new addition will address the ADA access and access to so much more. The completion of the OGS project will address the lack of ADA access, HVAC, safety and security, and the lack of learning spaces. There is no time to delay this anymore. Haven't the last 30+ years been enough? Western Middle School Fields Remediation Project. For 6 years, the students of Western Middle School have been unable to access any of these fields. 6 years is a very long time to be waiting for almost anything. While I'm not any kind of expert for the impact on young learners, as a parent, I can certainly recognize the stress in middle school children. This is time when children have the greatest growth physically and mentally. These children need time to play and be together. The fact of the matter is no child should ever be without a place to play, a place to grow, and a place to learn. Greenwich High School Cellular, so I'm moving along as we hear, okay? Cellular Improvements Project, this is all about access. This is about today, there is little to no service inside GHS. This is a safety issue and provides no immediate access to any of our students in case of any emergency. While some may feel this is unnecessary, it is access and safety issue, and this should be supported. And lastly, Central Middle School. What can we say about this one? Well, what parents, administration, faculty, and students truly care about at the end of the day is access to a safe building, the best possible solution to provide a safe and accessible school for all. This process will be long, and with the expectation of occupancy in 2026, we do know that we will need the absolute support of each and
to the first selectman for this budget process. So my wife and I live just blocks from OGS, and we have a daughter who graduated last year, and we have a first grader who's currently in the school. And OGS is certainly a cornerstone of the community. It has strong and growing enrollment, and it needs your support. I wanted to discuss this evening some of the values that are inherent in the request. You've heard a lot of details behind them, but to posture it this way, number one is the inclusivity of the request. Certainly you've heard a lot about how we're in violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, anti-discrimination, civil rights legislation, that we certainly teach our kids about the need for fairness and opportunity, and yet school that they attend is in violation of the ADA. We need to remedy that as soon as possible. We certainly make a commitment as a community to our kids' health and welfare, yet we're dealing with a school that has inadequate ventilation. I'm father of the first grader who has asthma, and certainly is an issue that we take very personally. It certainly needs a corrective HVAC system, and certainly the flooding situation, knowing a little bit about working in a security field and the need for resilience. I mean, you're looking at a situation that sewage flooding can come in, and the only mitigation for it is a single choke point of a manual labor who might be available when the incident happens. That is a recipe for not only failure of the plan, but also for additional spending for whenever that plan. So I think it was Brian Jacoby who talked about the wisdom of financial planning and investing ahead so that you don't have later greater waste of funds. And then lastly, our pledge to provide safety and security for our students. I do want to comment that we have noted the additional patrols following Uvalde, and those are greatly appreciated by all the parents. They give us great comfort. We have several needs, like the sprinkler system. We have the needs for the secure access to the school. We have a need to improve the school to bring it up to par with what we pledge to our students to support them every day. So I lastly just want to conclude with the timeliness of our request. The need is urgent, obviously. Allocated funding will not sit idle, which is the pox of any kind of budgeting process, and we greatly need your support. So thank you very much.
James Waters, to be followed by Michael Partridge.
Green light's my signal that it's good? Okay. All right, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the BET. My name is James Waters. I'm a member of RTM District 12 and the Budget Overview Committee and the Finance Committee. Tonight, I speak as chairman of the Old Greenwich School Building Committee. We've been hard at work since October. In the past 15 weeks, we've met 19 times and have made significant progress in making the OGS renovation actionable. We owe tremendous thanks to our team of volunteers who made this happen. We thank GPS's purchasing department for adjudicating our questions and guiding us. They're a great asset to the town, and we appreciate their hard work and expertise. We'd also like to thank the town legal department, town clerk's office for keeping us on track and by the book. And I will personally thank again Stephen Walco, Tony Turner, Leslie Moriarty, Mike Mason, and many others for their input. This has been a team effort, and we're lucky to have great public servants dedicated to the OGS project in our town. The Board of Ed approved the OGS Ed Specs in October 2021. As a reminder, key points to address: bringing the school into compliance with the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act, including the installation of an elevator, creating a single secure entryway for visitor management, managing stormwater to prevent further flooding and sewage seeping into classrooms, adding a building-wide sprinkler system to adhere to the fire code, addressing health issues with a building-wide HVAC system, ensuring new classrooms address a strong, sustained enrollment at OGS and 21st century learning environment. All of these are must-haves, things we should expect in every school in Greenwich. To begin to make this a reality, we've rolled up our sleeves to understand the ed specs and what they call for and what they don't call for. We've put together, solicited, and analyzed proposals from architects and owners' reps, interviewed candidates, analyzed compared costs, begun the process of interfacing with stakeholders and members of the community. We've briefed various RTM committees and the Board of Ed on our progress along the way. And last week, the Board of Ed unanimously endorsed our unanimously recommended architect, Silver Petroselli and Associates. We'll be prepared to speak to the BET and this budget committee during budget deliberations. And as we go about hiring our professional team to include architect, owner's rep, and other consultants, at the forefront is staying on time and on budget. We're confident we're in a position to move forward on this project in the coming fiscal year if funds are included in the 2023-2024 budget as recommended by the Board of Ed. You'll recall that $24.5 million has been estimated for the OGS renovation, in addition to the $1 million approved by this board last year. In the coming weeks, we're taking a deep dive on project costs to refine the estimate and ensure it's consistent with the scope and current construction costs. Thank you for your consideration, and we look forward to our upcoming conversations.
Thank you.
Next is Michael Partridge, to be followed by Jane Sprung.
Still green. Good evening. Thank you for being here, listening to everybody. I'm here. My name is Michael Partridge. I'm from Riverside, but I'm married to a teacher at Old Greenwich, and who grew up in Old Greenwich, went to school at Old Greenwich, and now my daughter's in 5th grade at Old Greenwich. Vivian hurt herself, hurt her knee, and this subject of ADA compliance became very personal to us when she went to school after on crutches and could not get up and down the stairs to her classroom. Fortunately, Mom's a teacher downstairs, so she would stay downstairs, wait until somebody could call, get help to get her up and down the stairs. 3 or 4 times a day, going up and down the stairs did not work out well for her. But now she's better and back at it, so that's good. But the compliance issue is a real issue. It needs to be addressed. Everybody else has said this. I don't need to repeat it, much more. And also the sewage. My teachers, my wife's being on the first floor, has experienced this firsthand in her classroom. And anyway, we shouldn't have to have this in Greenwich. We can do better for our schools. Thank you.
Jane Sprung, to be followed by Dina Orso and Matthew Kane.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jane Sprung. I serve on RTM District 10 and on the BOC. I'm also a 19-year resident of Greenwich, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself. And 2 topics. One is Central Middle School. First, I'd like to thank the Republican BET for prioritizing and rebuilding Central Middle School in fiscal year 22 ahead of other school projects. I'm glad that Central Middle School was identified as a more urgent issue and brought forward. I would also like to thank the BOE, the Building Committee, Tony Jones, and everyone for their work on this project. I am expressing concern that the scope of the project specs may be growing larger than originally intended. The BET unanimously approved $67.5 million, a 500 to 600 per square foot project for 508 students with a projected enrollment decline over the next 5 years. Now the BOE is recommending building for Central Middle School for 660 students at a $95 million budget, and the First Selectman's budget is $75 million. Can the BOE and budget committees consider alternative ed specs sized for the current needs on a location with the opportunity to build on the site if the student population grows versus the projected decline? Greenwich has many schools requiring ADA, HVAC, and capital improvement. I encourage the building committee to stay within original budget guidelines based upon student populations and/or the number of classrooms that are needed so that more projects can be completed with less impact on the mill rate given this inflationary environment. I hope that the building committee will work better together with more debate and less partisanship, which has been disheartening. I've met many members of the building committee, and I'm confident that they can efficiently construct a state-of-the-art Central Middle School while being so considerate of our tax dollars. My second topic is Nathaniel Witherall. I'm hitting the popular topics. So anyway, thank you to the BET First Selectman Office and to Nathaniel Witherall for considering a variety of approaches to deal with the troubling issues at Nathaniel Witherall. Nathaniel Witherall is an asset to the town. I'm a supporter, and my daughter has volunteered there for many years. However, I am concerned that the facility's rating has declined from 5 stars to 1 and now back to 2 stars, and that the town has had to invest over $30 million in subsidies just to cover losses.
30 seconds.
Okay, it is difficult with accounting issues. Anyway, we like the idea of partnering with a professional company that can provide high-quality care and the ongoing subsidies that will require. There are cutting-edge medical services that the town can offer, that not necessarily can offer by itself. So let's bring in someone who has a track record of managing this type of facility so we can get care for our seniors while protecting our taxpayers from unnecessary expenses. Thank you, everyone.
Next is Dina Urso and Matthew Kane, who signed up together, to be followed by Janet McMahon.
Good evening, BET Budget Committee members. My name is Dina Urso, and I'm one of the co-presidents of the Central Middle School PTA. I am here alongside our treasurer, Matthew Kane, to ask for your full budgetary support for the CMS rebuild project. In 1957, when the current CMS building was built, General Dwight D. Eisenhower was the president. The conflict in Vietnam was in its infancy, and Neil Armstrong was 12 years away from walking on the moon. The current building opened when events that our kids are now learning about in history class were current events on the evening news, which was being broadcast on black and white televisions in about half the homes of the United States. 1957 was a really long time ago. Who can anticipate how much life can change in decades? In that vein, we have heard a lot about enrollment projections and how those numbers play a role in this particular project. How much weight should be placed on projections that are theoretical and have just this school year been shown to be inaccurate and underestimated? I would argue very little. Speaking of history, Greenwich has an undeniable track record of kicking the can down the road on infrastructure concerns, especially as they pertain to our school buildings. Doing so has created the situation where the town finds itself now, having no choice but to rebuild a school that was deemed quote-unquote unfit for human occupancy a year ago, which is the real reason why it was pulled forward. We understand the different roles the PTA and the BET play under these circumstances. We, as the PTA, advocate for the students and their parents of CMS, both current and incoming. In that regard, we have never wavered in our support of the ed specs that were passed by the BOE in August of 2022. After following the conversation surrounding this project for almost a year, we feel it is borderline irresponsible to not place significant, if not all, weight on input from the principal, administrators, and teachers when figuring out what this building needs. If you have listened to any of the meetings where this project has been discussed by other boards like the BOE and committees like the Building Committee, you surely have heard some basic tenets of what current laws and regulations require when building a 21st century middle school. In summary, a middle school of this size cannot deliver instruction if it does not have space to accommodate at least 2 teams of students. A middle school built in current times cannot lack instructional space for things like SPED and ESL. A middle school built in current times must have hallways and classrooms that comply with laws like the ADA, a law that was passed over 30 years after the current building was built.
30 seconds.
Thank you. The ed specs as passed essentially are as small as you can get for a 2-team model, consisting simply of classrooms and adjoining spaces to comply with current regulations and laws.
Thank you, Dina. Matthew Kane, I'm the treasurer of the CMS PTA. I'm speaking in that capacity. I'm also here as a 8-year Greenwich resident, father of 3, one 7th grader at CMS, one 5th grader at North Street, and a 2nd grader that perhaps at North Street who will perhaps see a new building for CMS, hopefully. Mindful of Madam Chairwoman's reminder not to repeat comments, I will say that I'm appreciative of the opportunity to be here and wildly impressed by the comments made by my fellow Greenwich citizens. I thought Bob Cheney, Francis Wu-Nobe, and Brian Jacoby, frankly, all said it better than I can. So I will cut back very much on what I intended to say, other than just reflect that something the first selectman said about kicking the can down the road seems very appropriate here. It is undeniable, hearing all of the needs from schools, buildings in this town, that we have a major problem, that whether it's the actions of this board or another board, a Republican or a Democrat, simply doesn't matter. The time is now to fix these issues. We have a building that is falling down. We have buildings that are not ADA compliant. We have raw sewage flowing to the first floor classrooms. These are unacceptable. They're unacceptable in any town. They're unacceptable in this town. So I urge you all to please support the infrastructure initiatives, and vis-a-vis CMS in particular. We all know that spreading false information about expanding ed specs about a $67 million number that was not spec'd through construction bidding, was always intended to be a placeholder, serves nothing but delay. There is no more time for delay. I urge you to support the number proposed by the Board of Ed. Thank you.
Janet McMahon, followed by Christopher Weiss.
Good evening. My name is Janet McMahon, and while I'm an RTM member in District 8, I speak tonight as a parent of 2 children at Greenwich Public Schools. That said, my budget priorities have been and always will be funding our public schools adequately, and it should be the BET's top budget priority as well. You see, for as long as I've lived here, the Board of Education's operating budget has been continually squeezed dry due to the BET's arbitrary budget guideline of roughly 2% year over year. Did you know that our per pupil allocation for K-5 students has remained unchanged since 2012? Did you know that the last time the BOE's operating budget exceeded 3% was back in fiscal year 11 to 12? As a result, it's no surprise that field trips, enrichment programs, special events, extracurricular activities, and even textbooks keep disappearing since the meager BOE operating budget can barely fund our contractually obligated teacher salaries. I can't tell you how disturbing this is to me as a parent, not to mention how detrimental it is to our schools and our students' learning. And then there's the capital budget. For decades, we have exceedingly failed to maintain our facilities, and it shows. Ceilings collapsing, raw sewage floods, lack of ADA compliance, wall crack monitors. These are all now sadly the status quo at our public schools, and so here we are. Central Middle School has gotten to such a state of disrepair that renovating is no longer possible, so we need to rebuild. Except now that its ed specs have been finally created, voted on, and approved by the bipartisan Board of Education, some elected officials have voiced opposition to the cost, size, and scope of this project. Some balk over the 4,000 square foot net gain in size, citing irrelevant and misleading enrollment statistics. Others foolishly want to decrease the size of the school to that of Cos Cob School, which would necessitate busing of some students to Eastern or Western Middle School. And still others quietly want to delay its construction altogether in the hopes that building material prices will decrease over time. Spoiler alert, it won't. Meanwhile, CMS students, teachers, and staff sit in a ticking time bomb of a building, which is half covered in scaffolding, while the other half of the school sits on unusable flooded fields. And on the other side of town in Old Greenwich, raw sewage continues to flood the kindergarten classrooms, and children with mobility issues are carried around by teachers since there are still no elevators in the 6-story, 120-year-old building. Thank you. Ditto at Julian Curtis, where they have waited for 4 budget cycles for any kinds of renovations. At this rate, we may have to rebuild Julian Curtis too. So to reiterate, my budget priorities are keeping the Board of Ed's capital and operating budgets intact. I know you control the purse strings and you alone set the mill rate, but know that the mill rate sits on the back of 9,000 students who are learning in our decrepit schools for the better part of the day for yet another year. So please, prioritize the children and our schools over the mill rate for once. Thank you.
Christopher Weiss, to be followed by Allison Moss and Carrie Bisbee.
Good evening, members of the BET Budget Committee. My name is Christopher Weiss, principal of Riverside School. I would like to offer my strong support for the Greenwich Public Schools fiscal year 24 capital budget for the approval of the building study regarding a much-needed renovation at Riverside School in our building. With over 10 years of experience as the school's leader, I concur with the statement of need as noted in the proposed capital budget document on page 69, which highlights a lack of accessibility throughout the building, including, most importantly, no elevator to the second floor, an undersized cafeteria space with at times well over 90 students during lunch shifts, and a significant lack of program space with no dedicated science labs or common flexible spaces available for classes or groups, no separate space currently for our band program, Spanish or native Spanish program, occupational or physical therapy programs, nor our grade 2 ALP program, all of which have to use shared spaces around the school. We have an undersized main office suite with no conference room or meeting spaces, as well as security concerns, including having only one set of locking doors at the front entrance. In addition, with nearly 450 students, our building has some of the smallest K-5 classrooms by square footage in the district, especially the classrooms on our second floor. Our school also ranks among the lowest in square footage per student. Due to having no elevator to the second floor, all Riverside School students need to go up and down 2 flights of stairs at least 3 times per week for K2, for their art and music classes, and 3 or more times per day for 3-5 for their homerooms. Any student with mobility concerns will often need assistance maneuvering up and down the stairs to the second floor. Students with full crutches or wheelchairs are not able to access the second floor, and any students in K2 that have these needs will need to have their art and music classes in their homerooms, far from optimal. In addition, if a grade 3 to 5 student is in full crutches or wheelchair, we have to move the entire classroom setup down to the first floor, disrupting other spaces and other classes needing to move rooms, or the media space needing to be used as a homeroom. I join with our Riverside School PTA current and former co-presidents who will be speaking next in noting that the problems in our building's age, inaccessibility, and lack of space warrant a proper study to understand the full extent of the building's issues. We expect the findings from this study would lead to an actionable plan being developed and renovation expansion work being done and a major capital project to remedy these issues. While Riverside School is indeed picturesque and well-built, it is also outdated, capacity constrained, and for decades has lacked ADA accessibility. While we understand that major funding projects next year at a number of schools like Central Middle School, Old Greenwich, and Julian Curtis School, all of which we fully support, can put a strain on the town's resources, we urge you to approve the $150,000 line item in this capital budget for the necessary study at Riverside. Doing so will provide the necessary initial steps toward a much-needed renovation of our building to modernize it, provide accessibility, and allow for essential updates to meet the needs of our students in our school's educational programs. Thank you.
Okay. Next is Allison Moss and Carrie Bisbee, to be followed by Luke Zimzek, who I understand has arrived.
Thank you. Carrie and I are speaking together, so we'd like to consolidate our time slots, please. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Allison Moss, and I'm joined by Carrie Bisbee. As a current and a former co-president of the Riverside School PTA, we are here tonight representing the Riverside School family community, which includes nearly 450 students and 600 parents. As PTA leaders, Carrie and I have been given certain opportunities to engage with the school district and strengthen ties with other GPS schools, thereby making us better informed citizens. With this gained perspective, if we hadn't been in our PTA roles, we would still feel compelled to speak simply as concerned GPS parents and taxpayers. We begin by expressing the Riverside School community's full support for the capital projects at Central Middle School, Old Greenwich, and Julian Curtis. In turn, we urge you to fund those projects to continue the district's forward momentum. Now we'd like to use the rest of our time to talk about Riverside School in particular. We represent a community of families who value their children's education and Riverside's identity as a neighborhood school, where an overwhelming majority of students live within a mile of the campus. Our PTA is a frequent user of the space inside the school. As a result, we are familiar with several of the building's shortcomings. We believe the problems we've observed with the school building warrant a proper study to understand the full extent of the building's issues, especially if some impact the staff's ability to do their jobs effectively.
Some examples of these issues include accessibility. Our building has no elevator, putting it in violation of decades-old ADA accessibility standards. The second floor, which contains homerooms for more than half our student population, as well as our art and general music classrooms that are used by every Riverside student, can only be reached via 2 flights of stairs. Tight spaces. According to the facilities master plan, our school has some of the smallest K-5 classrooms and ranks among the lowest in square footage per K-5 student. Or just ask any Riverside student what they think, especially one in our largest grade, while they're eating lunch with nearly 95 of their peers in our 1,700 square foot cafeteria. Capacity constraints. Every room and every space in the building is being used. In the span of a day, some spaces are being repurposed multiple times or are being used by multiple instructors across different specialties. Instructors without classroom space. For some in recent years, their space has been a desk along a wall in the media center. Elsewhere, for example, 2/3 of our weekly band lessons are taught in a vestibule just outside the gymnasium, while PE classes, not the quietest activity at an elementary school, are taking place. All told, while our pre-war school building is well-built, don't let the charming facade fool you. Just walk inside its doors to see that it is too small, lacks accessibility, and is not configured for 21st century learning. Taking the steps now to fully understand and in the coming years remedy the building's array of issues is critically important to our community. To that end, we ask that you approve the $150,000 Riverside School Building Study in the BOE's fiscal 23-24 capital budget. We do acknowledge that current projects at other schools will lead to unprecedented, but in our opinion, necessary expenditures that will be significant, with the future work at Riverside being yet another major outlay in the coming years. However, we urge you to keep the momentum because the defects that need to be addressed in so many of our school buildings, including Riverside, are likewise significant. Thank you for your time and for everything you do for our community.
Next is Luke Zimzak. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Luke. To be followed by Craig Barendowski.
Hello. Thank you. And I appreciate looking at all of you up there. I think about the collective and cumulative time you contribute to our town, so I think we should all appreciate that. It's well valued, but perhaps underappreciated. I'll be direct. We have flooding issues in Port. Enable growth into the future so that if we're going to rebuild the North Street Bridge, let's make sure there's enough capacity so that flooding is relieved at some point once there's enough capacity downstream. We would like to see funding for study of the GHS property as well as properties south of the Post Road. Also understand in this area there's going to be work done by the state DOT on the Post Road. That doesn't directly affect this, but given that the Post Road will be largely reduced to 2 lanes rather than 4 lanes for some of that period, it's a good time if we need capacity under the Post Road to make sure that capacity is there. We'd like to make sure that there's funding to expand the study area to a broader look to make sure there are no other choke points so that sometime down the road, maybe in 2 or 3 years, someone say, oh, we didn't look at that. And then that adds another 2 to 3 years to the project. And then finally, some neighbors have spent, with their own money, they've hired Tigan Bond to do a study. And we would like to see that study information be part of the town's study. It will save time and effort. And the team on this are supposedly expert drainage engineers, so we would assume there's some valuable input there. I appreciate it. In conclusion, I think most people realize solving these flooding problems will take many years, but there has to be an overall plan to do it. And so we have to make sure that that plan is staged so that, 5 to 7 years from now, we're not talking about people moving out of their homes because we had too much rainfall. There's still homes that are not occupied as a result of that flooding. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Craig Barendowski, to be followed by Claire Kilgallen. After Claire, there are 3 more speakers who are signed up, so if you're in the audience and wish to speak, now's your chance to fill out a slip and hand it in to Mr. Mynarski.
Hi, thank you for the time to speak. My name is Craig Barendowski. I live on Grant Avenue in Old Greenwich. I'm a father of 3 young boys, 2 of which are in the elementary school now, and we have 1 following shortly behind. I think one of the things COVID taught us through it all is the importance of classroom learning and kids being in the classroom with their peers. It's important to their academic and social development, and I think the social development is a really key part to a child's development. Children are an essential component of our community. I come from public school system myself, and a family of educators. My mother was a teacher of 40 years. My sister's been teaching for a little over 20. Our school district was similarly very large, so I understand the complexity of managing this infrastructure, the network of schools, and each one and what they require. The one thing I don't understand, though, is how OGS has stayed non-ADA compliant for over 30 years. I was in elementary school when it was enacted, and we added an elevator the very next year. So unfortunately, my 9-year-old broke his leg a few weeks ago, and this became very real to him. 3 decades of neglect was a personal thing for him now. So as you can imagine, so he loves school so much, and he's excited every day to go to school. He's an active participant, very enthusiastic, maybe sometimes a little too enthusiastic, his teachers tell me, shouting instead of raising his hand. But you can imagine his crushing defeat when he realized he might not be able to attend school since his classroom's on the 3rd floor and there is no elevator. It was one of the first things he asked my wife and I, with tears streaming down his face. What am I going to do? How can I go to school? I can't go up and down the stairs in crutches. What if someone bumps me and I fall down the stairs? Dad, there's just so many stairs. So suddenly his joy for school became fear of school. His excitement was replaced by anxiety. His camaraderie was replaced by isolation. But through the miracle of incredible compassion and ingenuity from Principal Bensavengo and the vice principal and his teachers, they were able to make some lemonade out of a bushel basket of lemons. It has been disruptive to the teachers and the classmates, but they've come up with a temporary solution to a multi-decade problem. But bailing water out of a boat is not the same as fixing the boat. I find myself now asking questions, what if there was other kids that broke their leg? What if it was a teacher? The conclusion is simple. Relying on reaction is not a long-term solution, and inaction has been a long-term failure. We are failing our young children, who are a cornerstone of our community. It is time for us to be leaders and start addressing the needs of our children and faculty. My friends with older children have told me, cherish your time, because if you blink, you might miss it. Let's not blink and stay ADA non-compliant for another 30 years. Thank you.
Claire Kilgallen, to be followed by Joseph Kantorski.
I like how you lined up the 2 Byram people. Good evening, Chairman Tarkington and BET members. Thank you for your service to the town. My name is Claire Kilgallen. I'm a Greenwich property owner, taxpayer, resident. My children attend Western and GHS. I have served on the New Lebanon Building Committee. I now serve on the Central Middle School Building Committee. However, I am speaking solely as an ordinary resident, just like many here tonight. I'll touch on a few different things. Steph and all the other speakers who spoke powerfully about capital investment in our schools, I'm with that. I'm going to raise something a little different, operational. the health department has reacted reactionary to endemics and emergencies that have arisen. The trends show that it would be smart to put in a small amount of money, $5,000, as an emergency line each year so they can respond quickly. I'm in support of the Byram intersection. I'm sure Joe's going to cover that. I'm going to shift gears onto Central. I hear people, I feel like I'm in deja vu right now. Oversized, enrollment issues, make the school smaller. That's what everybody said about New Lebanon. I'm happy to give you a great report. People who said that we would never fill the seats at New Lebanon, I'm here to tell you they are being filled. 4 years into a school that opened halfway through the year and following pandemic, this 374 school building already has 340 students. They should have 4 sections of kindergarten in a school that was built to have 3 sections for each grade. The projections are over projection this year. Okay, if you build it, they will come. Let me go to the size of Central. No one is denying a new school is needed. However, some think a smaller school should be built. The proposed new CMS with 10 general classrooms per grade will not be oversized. 10 is what they need today. These children take classes in differing levels and electives right now. 10 per grade, 30 classrooms. That's appropriate now and in the future. As for the $67.5 last year, that was for hard construction costs to replace the building. That predated the ed specs being developed. It predated the professionals being retained. The number that the BOE has put forward is from professionals, not just one professional. 8 different architectural firms gave that number. Are 8 professional architectural firms pricing it out wrong? Are they all wrong?
30 seconds.
Greenwich's value proposition is qualitative and inexorably intertwined with properly funded school district. The fiscally prudent thing to do is to not sacrifice the town's reputation for excellence in its schools and town services at the altar of a number, the mill rate. The return on investment issue is not just about property values. It's more than that. It's about investing in children who are our future. And just 10 years after the horrible day in Sandy Hook and 8 months since Uvalde, there are no do-overs for these vulnerable young citizens. The school capital budget is not about politics. It's about the children. It's about values. It's about being upstanders, not bystanders.
Time's up.
Doing what is right. Approve the budget as submitted by the BOE. Thank you.
Joseph Kantorski, to be followed by Molly Salibi.
My name is Joseph Kantorski, and I'm here representing the Byram neighborhood as its chairman. I want to thank you for your time tonight. Crossing a street in Byram shouldn't be a big deal, right? I want to tell you a story. Liz Eckerts, the BNA's vice chairman, on October 3rd, 2019, her husband Tom was walking their dog Finnegan, and Tom was hit by a speeding car as he tried to cross Delavan Avenue at the corner of Veterans Way. Tom sustained injuries that are still with him today. Unfortunately, Tom's not alone in fearing to cross the street in Byram. I've sent all of you a 7-page PDF that further describes how dangerous it is to cross our streets because many of them have become raceways. Speeding is rampant. The PDF includes fears and concerns about speeding cars as we recorded in our 2021 survey. The PDF also includes links to 33 articles in the local press about accidents in Byram since 2014. And it lists the many efforts over the years that we and others have made to address our traffic safety concerns. Now, most people don't know how fast they're going. Some of them just don't care. Police can't be everywhere every time someone hits 45 down a residential street that's clearly marked 25. So how do we get them to slow down? Well, believe it or not, we can get them to police themselves. Police themselves? Yes, strategically placed stationary radar speed signs are a proven way to get drivers to slow down. We're already doing it with the flashing radar signs near our schools. So we did some homework, and we found that what we needed, we could find from the leading manufacturer of traffic safety products in the country, Carmanah, I've included a page from their website in the PDF about the benefits of radar speed signs and links to other traffic safety initiatives. I strongly encourage you to take the time to read Carmana's page in the PDF, especially their chart showing a modest reduction in a car's speed and reduced pedestrian fatality rates. We ask that you set the funds aside for the purchase and installation of a number of stationary radar speed signs that will best serve our traffic calming needs. We stand ready to work with the BET and all relevant town departments to help determine how best to make our streets safer and improve our quality of life. Safer streets,
30 seconds.
improved quality of life. What's not to like? Thank you.
So speaker number 25 is Molly Salibi, to be followed by our final speaker of the evening, unless Pete has more slips, Vin DeMarco.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Most of the board knows me, but for others, I'm Molly Salibi, RTM District 8 Public Works Committee, and now a proud member of the fabulous Old Greenwich School Building Committee. We're working very hard to advance this critical renovation addition project. I believe your chair has received our first quarterly report, and I hope that you've all had a chance to look at it. And I ask those on this board who haven't recently been at the school to please schedule a walkthrough as soon as possible. I heard stated tonight that we only do one school project at a time. Really? That's no policy. This BET board has the authority to instate projects and funding to move items. And with that, I came here tonight to ask that along with Central Middle School, you fund Old Greenwich School without delay. Students shouldn't wait an entire additional year, little children, because we now have Central too. I wrote a lengthy letter to the editor last year in support of a new Central Middle School, which I think most of you will recall, and I want both of these endeavors to move forward now. We have a hefty schools capital plan. There will always be competing projects. We need to stop trading one for the other and delaying. As I've said publicly in the past, it seems not that we can't spend adequate necessary funds, it's that we won't. We have the money, and if some of you don't appreciate comments about the board being stingy, as some people feel, or references to our crumbling schools, then please show us with your financial commitment. Yes, some of the buildings are in good shape, more or not, and it's a problem, and we need to address what we haven't done, not talk about what has been. When I was recently at Coscob School for my RTM meeting, riding on the elevator, I thought about the children at Old Greenwich School without an elevator in a building with 6 floor levels, and that recently there were 4 Old Greenwich students on crutches simultaneously. It's depressing, frankly. And now it's personal to me because we meet at Old Greenwich School and we see the children. And I'm also providing reading support to 2 precious young students right after our weekly building committee meetings, and I care about them. Some things bear repeating. An elementary school decades out of ADA compliance with no elevator, no accessible front nor gym auditorium entrance, without a sprinkler system in the majority of the building to meet current fire code, with raw sewage having breached kindergarten classrooms, poor air quality, scarcity of space. These are urgent problems to have already been rectified, not nice to haves. The most important role of this finance board is to determine how to fund with an emphasis on how. I want to continue to have faith in this board as a whole and hope that our words have influence and impact on you, and that these public hearings matter. I've often wondered if they do. Please show us that's the case. Thank you.
Vin DeMarco, to be followed by Alex Pop, who I believe is the last speaker.
So I can't be last, I guess. Thank you for the opportunity. We could always write letters or whatever we want to do, but it's a good idea to speak in public sometimes. I'm Vin DeMarco. I'm a townie, lifelong resident. I graduated from Greenwich High School in 1973, so that makes me a 67-year resident. And back somewhere around then, there was the first oil embargo or something like that, some sort of a gas crisis. There's another one since then, pretty bad one. And then we had COVID. Throughout all of those crises, people dusted off their bicycles. I forgot to mention that I'm chair of the Selectmen's Bicycle Task Force. We'll be starting back up again, meeting in hopefully the end of February, unless something changes. We identified back in October timeframe, a bunch of projects that DPW had on their capital list that were in last year's budget. There were placeholders in last year's budget, in which, or by which, through which, those projects could have funded certain bicycle and pedestrian micromobility improvements. I don't even know what is carried forward in the budget because I haven't seen the recommended budget. I'm not an RTM member anymore. I'll see it tomorrow maybe or tonight. But in any case, I can't speak to any specific project. But I will say this. Infrastructure, basic infrastructure. We're all talking about access to in our schools, at our schools, on our school grounds. How do we get to our schools? Is it only by car or bus? Is it only by an automotive means? How do we get around town? People, after COVID, they didn't just put the bikes back in the garage. They said, wait a minute, I'd like to continue to use my bike or my scooter or my e-bike or my e-scooter or a small motorcycle, and they did. And they continue to do that, and we'll see a lot more of it this coming spring. Much development has happened over those 50 years, and whether it's our buildings or public buildings or private developments. We need that infrastructure. We need that basic infrastructure so that we don't all have to drive all the time. We're going to be sorry if we don't address this soon. Thank you.
Alex Pop.
I thought I was going to be grouped with the Byram folks, but I'm proud to be with the Pembroke people. Alex Pop, just 3 items. First, I'd just like to thank the BET for keeping an eye on the mill rate over the past couple years. If you're in Byram and you're a homeowner, property taxes went up 20 to 30% in this past year, and I recognize that's a product of home values going up. But just please be very mindful that mill rates disproportionately impact workforce employees, blue-collar workers, in their efforts to own a home and maintain a home. Those are the people we're trying to keep in Byram and in Greenwich. So a mill rate just pushes them farther up into Fairfield County. Regarding Central Middle School, I think the town is well served by having Miss Aurora on the building committee. I think it's quite unfortunate that other members of the committee were vocal and critical of her practical viewpoints. Like her, I support the efforts to smart size the school and not oversize it. Look, the district enrollment over the next decade at the school is going to be 450 to 500. That's from the district's enrollment reports. So I'm not sure why you would build a structure for 660 students. That's probably about 35 to maybe 45% larger than you need it. And the only ones that probably benefit are the architects, the builders, and the suppliers. And finally, I thought it was prudent that the BET asked the Board of Ed to address declining enrollment this year. As you are aware, the district has lost over 450 elementary school students in the last 5 years. Enrollment dropped over 450 students in the last 5 years. That's directly from the enrollment reports. 15 months ago, Joe Kelly asked for a plan to get ahead of declining enrollment. I kind of feel like we're behind it. And examples are like the capital project, the process. It's kind of backwards. We're driving in the dark, I think. We continue to move projects forward, with major renovations, which some of it I support, but we're also expanding structures. But there's no regard to the declining enrollment trend and the excess capacity building up in our school systems. And also, we heard our speaker talked about the success at New Leb. So if New Leb is going up and we're down 450 students, I'm thinking, other schools are probably hurting for enrollment. So as a result, I just think our operational management expenditures are probably outpacing student programs. Thank you.
So I think we've completed all of our signups for you. Oh, nope. We have our cameraman, Don Conway, who'd like to come to the podium. So we're number, right?
I come out of my hall.
I think you're going to have to fill in a slip, though, so we have a record for it afterwards.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
I won't take up time.
So we have Don Conway
Two
here with
things.
us.
Earlier tonight, you had a lady that was asking about public or private transportation for elderly people around town and so forth. No one mentioned Call a Ride. I got to put a plug in for our great group. We operate out of the Presbyterian Church up on the top of the avenue. We have 3 cars, and by the way, it doesn't cost you a dime, and it's not funded by the town. So please, folks, if you need a ride, we operate from 9 to 3:30 every day. Second, this does control the town. Public Works is going to have a budget for paving and so forth. There's bicycles in town. The Bicycle Commission, I believe, just okayed the route from, I think, Maine through various other states, which comes right through Greenwich and goes into New York. Those streets, if they're going to be repaved, I would ask you really to remind them the day they come before you, if you wouldn't mind asking if they put a bicycle path in there, the width of it. Okay? Thank you very much. Ciao.
So now we've completed our speakers, and so I thank you for your comments, all of you. We wish you all health, safety, and a good year. We look forward to the department budget meetings and the fiscal year 2024 budget that must continue to offer services that make Greenwich the best place to live, raise a family, start a business, or retire. Again, thank you for attending.
I make a motion to adjourn. Wait.